Hello everyone, I'm Shekhar Tomar. I'm a professor of economics at the Indian School of Business, and today we are going to talk about firm resilience during crisis episodes. What do I mean by crisis? I mainly mean recessions. So let's get started, and I'm just going to give a large helicopter view to get the discussion started. So we have heard about this quote from Schumpeter for a very long time, that at the heart of capitalism is creative destruction. So we know that the economy goes through these boom and bust cycle, which happen at a period of every 4, 5 to 10 years. Now, generally, during recessions or during the bust periods, firms usually see negative sales growth. Now, that's fine if the firms just see negative sales growth. But what we also see is that sometimes firms have to exit due to tough conditions in the market. Now, it's not that the firms don't exit during normal periods. So firms do exit the market even during normal periods. And if you carefully look at this graph, we have three types of firms listed over. One is the aggregate, or on average, what is the exit rate in the market. And so if we look beginning 2007, the exit rate for average firm was somewhere around 2 to 3%. Then it rises up in 2008, it goes up to 5%. But what's interesting to note over here is that among these three different types of firms, we have put together good standing firms, which are basically the firms with good credit rating. And there are others which are delinquent firms or which don't have that great a rating in the market. And we see that these exit rates, they go up very sharply for the delinquent firms, which are represented here by this red line. The exit rate goes up to 20% for them. So these firms are the ones which suffer the most during the crisis period. And that's where this quote, this creative destruction comes in, that the market is cleansed of firms which were performing poorly even before the recession started. So as I said, it's a very interesting thing to look at. What makes these firms resilient? So cash is the king. So if you are sitting with cash before the crisis episodes, you're going to do much better. Now, the equivalent of measuring this cash value for a firm is, we can think about how leveraged the firm is. And there has been extant literature on this topic, where it has been documented that highly leveraged firms, they usually perform worse during the recessions, while low leveraged firms, they perform better. Now, why is that so? It's because of the financial constraints. They usually become more binding during the crisis episodes. So just to think of it intuitively, you are highly leveraged, so maybe your cash flow is impacted more. You probably need new debt more than low leveraged firms, but you can't get that because no one is willing to provide you this debt in the market. So you're unable to raise debt. Even if you raise debt, you have to pay high interest payments. And so it's a double whammy for a highly leveraged firm going into the crisis or recessionary episodes. Now, this is also important to think from a long run perspective, that the recession maybe would get over in a year or two. But these financial constraints are going to force firms to fire more employees. And so they cannot retain their employees, which is going to have an impact on their sales growth in the future. So it's not just about survival, but even the sales growth after the recessionary episodes, it's much worse for highly leveraged firms. I'm just giving an example over here from this paper by Giroux and Muller. So it's very well documented for the Great Recession, which is the 2008-2009 episode, how firms which were highly leveraged, they saw a decline in employment. Now, debt is not the only factor. Let's look at the next important factor. And the next factor we are going to look at is firm organization. Now, in this case, a firm can be more decentralized or centralized in terms of decision making. And in terms of this organization, both type of firms have their positives and negatives. So for example, in recessionary episodes, firms can make use of local information. And that local information becomes more important during crisis episodes because some parts of the country can be doing better or worse than another. And so having this local information can be utilized better in a decentralized form. So it makes decentralized firms more agile and better off during recessionary episodes. On the other hand, if you want to take tough decisions, maybe lay off a lot of workers or shut down some specific parts of the business, then it's probably more difficult in decentralized firms because there are various avenues that you have to consult before taking these tough decisions. This Aguillon et al. Paper from 2017, where they saw that at least during the 2008-2009 recession, on average, the firms that were more decentralized or delegated more power from central headquarters to local plant managers, they performed better, both in terms of sales and also in terms of employment. Now let's go to the next part, which is looking at, is layoffs the answer or not? Now, it's one of the most difficult decisions that firm managers have to take, whether they want to lay off some employees during crisis episodes. Now, one can definitely see that it has an impact on the cash flow because you're cutting down costs by laying off some workers. But the question is it a good strategy or not? So in the short run, some layoffs are inevitable, mainly for cash flow perspective. But in the long run, it imposes the cost on firms which fire employees because training employees is very costly and it takes a long time. So maybe you would survive the recession if you lay off some of your workers, but in the long run, it's worse for you because then you have to train and hire new set of employees. So there is really this tussle, really this trade-off going on between the short run and the long run when you take this decision. So our reduction or furloughs, there might be some other ways for firms to survive the recession and improve their cash flow during this time period. Lastly, and most importantly, the other part is tech adoption. We keep hearing about tech adoption in the industry, how important is that to grow. But this kind of tech adoption can be much more beneficial during the crisis episodes. But let's think from a firm perspective, which had already adopted tech going into the crisis episodes. So these firms generally perform better during the crisis. Why? Because IT investment in general make firms more agile in decision making, which is even more important during the crisis episodes. And moving beyond IT, if you have data about your industry, about your firm, then you can also use analytics for decision making during these periods. Now, once again, using data for making these decisions is even more important during crisis episodes because you need to have that 360-degree view of your business to be able to make those decisions. So just to summarize, recessions can have this cleansing effect or survival of the fittest, if you may want to call it. And I didn't get to touch upon within firm cleansing effect. We talked about the overall economy, that the best firms are going to survive. But I think this is also an important point to think of, that there is some cleansing happening during the recession, even within the firm. And what I mean by that, the firms generally tend to stick to their core business and shut down non-performing businesses within their own firm. Now, in terms of main characteristics, debt management, organization structure, labor optimization, tech upgradation, all of these are super important. And at least for tech upgradation, we know that during recessions, a lot of firms do adopt, or the pace of tech adoption goes faster. But we also know that firms which were already prepared before the crisis episodes, they perform much better. So probably the key takeaway from here is that, yes, tough decision making can help you survive during these crisis episodes. But if you can, you should start preparing for the crisis before the crisis hits.